Oh, how are you doing? Hope you're having a good day. Grandma wants to read you some more of Charlie's Monument. We're going to continue the story. Nellie has come up and visited Charlie on the top of his hill. For several days, Charlie saw no sign of Nellie, but his thoughts were never far from her. He found himself following her footprints across the hill, and often he stood and gazed at the mountains and valley, wondering at the beauty they had shared. His thoughts were not always pleasant, however. Often as he sat, he contemplated the shoulder where his arm should have been, and he became extremely conscious of the way his twisted body forced him to shuffle as he walked. More and more, he castigated himself for being so foolish as to allow himself to think so much of Nellie. He grew more and more certain that her visit had been merely a chance, and that now her curiosity had been satisfied, she would never be back. A feeling of bitterness came with those thoughts, and it became harder than ever to appreciate all that surrounded him, as his mother had counseled him to do. He realized that these feelings were coming about, excuse me, because he had begun to doubt his own value. But what else could he do? How could he possibly be expected to feel good about having been given such a worthless body? What could he ever hope to offer such a wonderfully perfect person as Nellie was? How could he ever feel self-confident and have a feeling of personal worth when reality screamed so loudly at him? Such were his thoughts as day after never-ending day, Charlie guarded the town. Each morning he would ride to the base of the hill, fill the water tub for his horse, locate a suitable stone for his monument, struggle with it to the top of the hill, and place it carefully among the others. Then he would spend the entire day watching for sign of trouble, until with darkness he would slide down the hill and return to his little shack, there to get ready to do the same thing the next day. Often he wondered whether he could stand it much longer, and yet he kept going simply because he knew that was what he was supposed to do. Almost 2 weeks after Nellie's first visit to the hill, she came again, and Charlie, who had almost convinced himself that she would never be back, was just as surprised as before. Nellie, always direct, spent little time with pleasantries. "Charles," she stated matter-of-factly, "Daddy told me that I must stay away from this hill, but I told him I was now a big girl and would go where I wanted and would see whomever I chose." Then she began to laugh and said, "He told me that I would become the scandal of the town. Can you imagine that? Me, who never did a bad thing in my life, being this town scandal?" Charlie smiled with her, but said nothing, for he was worrying about her father. Why had he forbidden her to come? And even more important, why had she chosen to disobey him? Was it because of his deformities? Nellie, apparently unaware of his silence, went right on. "Do you remember the other day when we saw the widow Ames closing her laundry early? Well, she came in the bank yesterday, so I asked her where she was going when she closed early. Charles, you never saw anyone get so flustered and upset. She told Daddy I was a little busybody, and the uproar still hasn't ended. I told you a person could become a great gossip by being up here." For a moment they stood in silence, and then Nellie spoke again. "Charles, the quietness up here seems to get in a person. Already I have calmed down a great deal. I wish I knew what was wrong with Daddy, that he didn't want me up here. I know he isn't worried about my safety, for he lets me ride all over the valley, and I hate to be disobedient to him. That hurts me as much as it does him. I really do love him, but I do think he is wrong in this. Charles, what should I do?" For a long moment, Charlie was silent, trying to arrange his thoughts. Then at last he spoke. I don't know, Nellie. It's been so long since I had folks that I can hardly remember. But I always tried to obey Mother because she usually knew more than me. But she did tell me that I had to think on my own and learn to do the things I thought and felt were right, even if others disagreed with me. I guess it's pretty hard to know for sure unless you can tell by your really deep feelings. Well, then, she said gaily, I'm all right. I certainly feel good about being up here. Then she turned abruptly and walked toward the monument, and Charles' heart sank. He couldn't explain it, but somehow that monument was so special to him that he couldn't talk about it. It had become too much a part of him. Nellie examined the pile of rocks very carefully. In the few years since Charlie had started it, the monument had grown quite large. It was now nearly as tall as Charlie, while its diameter at the base was a little over 10 feet. Nellie stood and studied it for such a long time that Charlie finally walked over and sat on the rim rock. From there, he could see the West Mountain, and already the blue shadows of afternoon were creeping down the canyons. Without a doubt, this was his favorite view at his favorite time of day. Suddenly, Nellie was beside him, sitting on the rim rock, and Charlie waited for her burst of happy chatter. But no, she sat in silence, apparently as enthralled with the beauty of God's handiwork as he was. For perhaps an hour they sat, communicating through silence, while the panorama of the afternoon unfolded before them. Charlie finally spoke, and he was surprised again at how easily the words came. Sitting here like this, he said, watching what we've been watching, a feller sure comes to appreciate what a builder God must be. No matter how hard you look or how critical you get, there ain't nothing done wrong. Yes, Nellie replied quietly. And I'd say that you are quite a builder too, Charles Edward Langley, Jr. Surprised that she knew his whole name, Charlie turned a questioning glance at her. A builder? What have I ever built? Oh, stuff, Nellie responded indignantly. You know as well as I do. But if you want to play dumb, I'll go along with you. Most obvious, of course, is your pile of rocks back there. He couldn't understand it, but when Nellie called his monument a pile of rocks, Charlie suddenly felt hurt. Why did something that was so special to him appear so common to another, such as Nellie? She, in turn, couldn't help but notice his expression, and she suddenly knew that she had made some sort of blunder. Oh, Charles, I've hurt you. What did I say wrong? Well, and Charles fought for control. Nothing really. I guess I'm just a little touchy today. That's not so. Please tell me. I really wish you would. For a time, Charlie wondered just how to tell her, but at last he just blurted it out. Nellie, them rocks is my monument. Oh, she replied thoughtfully. I knew they were simply special because they had been placed so carefully, but I didn't expect them to be that special. Charles, tell me about it, please. Well, I reckon there ain't too much to tell, he replied evasively, alarmed now that he had exposed himself so much. It's just a pile of rocks I've been making. Nellie searched his face for a long moment before quietly replying, I guess maybe I deserved that, Charles. I really don't have any business asking these questions. I won't pry anymore. Of course, that made Charlie feel worse than ever. He so wanted to share with her his feelings. Next to his mother, Nellie had become the most special person he had ever known, and he hadn't meant to hurt her. Maybe she could understand. At least he decided it was worth a try. Nellie, look at me. Tell me honestly, what do you see? I see you, Charles. Yes, I know, but I don't mean that, and you know it. You see the way I am. What can I ever hope to offer anyone in this life? Nothing. And since I have nothing to offer, when I am gone, there will be nothing left for people to remember me by. And so, she said quietly, and Charles silently wondered at the tear coursing down her cheek. You are building your own monument to make certain you are never forgotten. That's right, he replied with conviction. Each day I pick a rock for the pile, and each day it grows a little larger. One day all the valley will be able to see it, and they will always know that I have been here. Nellie sat silently for so long after he finished speaking that Charlie grew nervous. Gradually, the shadows lengthened across the top of the hill, and at last the lowering sun disappeared behind the mountain. That seemed to awaken the girl, for she jumped to her feet, took Charlie's hand in hers, squeezed it, and thanked him for a wonderful afternoon. Then she was gone. And that's all Grandma's going to read right now. I hope you're enjoying the story. Remember, Grandma loves you. Bye.